Hey, everybody, this is David Paul, the host of the Capital Stack podcast, where we talk to founders, entrepreneurs, operators, and investors about all things value creation within startups. Today, I am speaking to Tom Griffiths, who is the founder and CEO of Hone HQ, which is a horizontal SaaS platform in which we're going to talk more about. Previously, he was the co-founder and chief product officer of FanDuel. Tom is a great entrepreneur who's very good at building value creation, and I'm super lucky to have him on. Tom, how you doing?
David, great to see you. Yeah, thanks for having me. Doing well, thanks. Just another crazy day in startup land, but can't complain.
You just closed a $30 million Series B, yeah?
Yes, yeah. Glad to get it in the bank. We did it this summer, just announced it earlier this month. So yeah, we're thrilled.
Tell me a little bit about Hone. What's this new thing? I want to go talk about FanDuel, but I want to talk right now. I want to put the light on Hone and Hone HQ and what you're doing now, and because I think that's more relevant for today.
No, I appreciate it. It's like the musician that gets to talk about his new album as opposed to like
Yeah.
before.
But play Freebird. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, exactly. We'll get to that. No, I mean, Hone actually came out of FanDuel, right? So, we did FanDuel, scaled it for 10 years, was the head of product, but cared a lot about, developing our people, always had a personal passion for education. My mom was a public school teacher, and I taught when I was doing my PhD program. And so cared about upskilling people. And you can see that the technical upskilling was kind of figured out, right? You could go to the internet and get better at JavaScript or Python or whatever. The piece that wasn't figured out is like, how do you make someone a better manager, or how do you make someone more collaborative? Like, these are the key people skills that we could see that really made the difference in successful teams. But the way that you would train that is either you don't, like so many companies don't even think to do that, or there's an experience that you go sit in a classroom, maybe at your HQ that you've flown in for. Maybe you're sitting at a Courtyard Marriott for a couple of days with some person with a flip chart at the front of the classroom. Like, traditional corporate training is really boring and certainly doesn't scale to today's hybrid and remote workplace. So about 4 years ago, this was pre-pandemic, we got thinking about, as product people, how could we just blow up that stuffy corporate classroom training experience and reimagine it for the modern workplace, which was much more distributed, much more data driven, and much more kind of consumer grade in terms of the digital experience that people get. And so we started goofing around building Zoom-based classes for things like feedback and delegation and Manager 101. We realized that customers needed help scaling that, just the logistics and the reminders and the rescheduling and the reporting. So we built a SaaS platform that does that part. And then COVID happened, which was just a tremendous kind of explosion point for us, where everybody suddenly is working remote and hybrid. And the solution we'd built, thinking a few years ahead, was now meeting the moment. And so that's how we got started with Hone, and that's what we do.
that's super interesting. When I always think like the consulting and corporate training, that's a very mature business. And, I think about people that provide those services, they have to bring a lot of value because they charge a lot of money, but, there's a place for them in the world because in-house training of people that are actually providing house-in training, it's like a check the box type of thing. And it's never good. Right.
Right.
So, how do you think about when an employee goes and starts receiving your training on your platform? How do you think about like the value they get from receiving that versus the value they could get in real life from not like a corporate training program, but just a mentorship program from somebody within the organization? Because I see a lot of companies that they don't have really great culture and leadership skills because it's not a part of their culture or leadership, right? And if they're not adopting it at a senior level, how can they expect to people adopt it on the mid-management?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, that last point is a really important one. Like, as the leader of the company, you really need to model the values, the culture, the practices. And so, we do executive briefings for top team for them to understand at least the principles that we're teaching further down the organization, because it's got to connect. You're absolutely right. But in terms of like how does that relate to other learning experiences like mentorship or real world projects, I mean, I think it takes a multifaceted approach to develop someone as a manager or as a leader. And the part that we play is that more formal training where everybody needs to understand like what is a structure of a coaching conversation, like how do you do that, but also
Mm,
giving them an opportunity to practice it in our sessions. So they're highly interactive. We're not talking about webinars. It's like 10 or 12 people together with a coach, practicing what they've been taught, getting feedback, doing it again. And so they get to build the muscle in the sessions that they then go and use in the real world. So there's more of a blurry line between the training itself and how they're applying it, because we're doing that once a week for several weeks. They'll learn a technique, they'll go practice it in the real world, and then they'll come back together and talk about how that went, versus again the kind of the 2-day annual training offsite where it's just a bunch of new stuff and then you're left to your own devices. So there's that. I also think that mentorship, to your point, is very inconsistent. Like someone might have a great mentor and they might teach them everything, and that's wonderful. But oftentimes that's not the case. And there can also be bias introduced in mentorship, where there's kind of familiarity bias. If you're mentoring someone from your school at your company, it can perpetuate the same lack of diversity up the organization as there's always been. And so it's fairer and more universal and accessible to have the broad-based training first, so that everybody gets the same experience.
yeah. Yeah, no, I can see that. Why do you think that leadership and soft skill training isn't something that has been really adopted? I mean, is it because like it's there, personality, indexing's there, it's been around for a while. However, I would just think it's everything, right? And why hasn't it been really proliferated into corporate development?
Yeah, I think there's two ends of the market, the top and the bottom, right? And so if you're a CEO or you're on an executive team, the company can justify paying for an expensive coach for you and some expensive training, because it is expensive. Like you got to fly people in, you got to fly the instructor in, you got to rent out your hotel ballroom for a couple of days. And so really the company can only justify paying for that for a senior audience. Um, what do they do for everybody else? Well, they do what they can, which is nowadays really just um, buying a video library. So it might be a LinkedIn Learning
Mm-hmm.
or something from HBR that gives people videos that they can go watch if they ask, like, how do I do a performance review? Well, we can't afford to fly you into the location where we would train you, but go watch this video. And so what we're trying to do with Hone is actually bring the executive level experience to the masses, because we can now with tools like Zoom and the pricing model that we've got and the software that we've built that makes the logistics automated, so that you don't have that overhead. And so you can actually get it further down the org. And part of our mission is to create access to that executive level training.
And so, how much of it is like? Would you say? I mean, you do have content on the platform as well, correct?
Yeah, I mean, 90% of our experience is live classes, and then we have supporting content that reinforce that. So, say you learn how to give feedback in January, but your performance review cycle when you're evaluating your team member is in June. You can go watch the video to recap what you learned.
Yeah, that's interesting, because content is I mean, I was in kind of a platform content publishing business, and it took about 3 months before all of it was on YouTube. Right? I mean, people just rip it off.
Right.
But having that live engagement, was that difficult raising money, knowing that you had to support coaches and people in your cost of goods, and it wasn't like a super scaly type SaaS company that you see traditionally get funded in Silicon Valley?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's definitely an atypical model for sure to have a human in the loop, should we say, delivering things. I originally set out. My grad school was in machine learning and an AI, and so I thought maybe we can make an AI coach that will just teach people without a human, and that can scale to everybody. Turns out shocker, you need real people to teach real people skills, because the competition is so nuanced.
Right.
You don't feel accountable to a chatbot, right? You feel accountable to your peers and to a human. And so quickly we realized we needed to have that human in the loop to create an effective learning experience. But what's nice about our model is that we get so many efficiencies from software when it comes to logistics and reinforcement. And there's a lot of pooled budget because, if a company's got a budget of a few $100s per head, um, and we're training 15 people at a time, that allows us to, generate good revenue per class and pay the coach really well per class as well, but still make a good margin. And so our margins are approaching software margins, north of 70%, which you wouldn't see, say, with a more traditional services business or a one-to-one coaching platform.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I feel when building a product like this, solve the problem first, in a
Right.
real meaningful way before
Yep.
you start optimizing for margin.
100%. Yeah, you need to know that you've got something that people will buy and love and use and continue to use and actually delivers the result you're saying you're going to deliver. And then once you've got that, you probably got there doing like, a few different spreadsheets, automations, hacky code that you want to throw away. And then, then you start to harden the solution and make it more efficient. And, we've been on this journey at Hone. We did this journey at FanDuel. You just kind of start cranking through automating the pieces and improving your margin. But yeah, you've got to find the shortest path to value early on for sure.
So I've been thinking a little bit about corporate training and basically employee engagement, and recruiting, anything within the HR world lately. And I look at, what's going to happen in the United States over the next 12, 24, 36 months as far as economy, global unrest, inflation, and all that stuff. And I think about, yes, recruiting people and engaging people and keeping people was a problem in a great economy. Is it going to be a really big problem going forward? And I think I hope hopefully the answer, hopefully companies want to continue to enhance, right, people over time. But do you feel like the efficacy of a lot of the employee engagement is going to be there in a contracting economy, like when loaves of bread are $4?
um, yeah. I mean, a few things to say on this. First of all, I mean, the picture right now in the economy is quite mixed, in that, yes, there's inflation and interest rates going up, but unemployment is close to all-time lows. And so it's still,
I know.
but
It's crazy.
it is crazy. And so it's quite a tight labor market, which means that recruitment and retention are still challenges for companies.
Mm-hmm.
But in other ways, business isn't doing so well, and so that puts pressure on budget. And so what we say to companies, and they understand, is that okay, if you maybe frozen headcount because you're nervous or uncertain about how revenues are going to grow over the next 12 months, or maybe you've even done a RIF where you've reduced headcount. Well, you've certainly got fewer people either way than you thought you would, and you still have these lofty ambitions. So how do you get more from the people that you have still with you? Well, obviously that's training to
Mm-hmm.
upskill them so that they can do more. The other thing is you got to hold on to those people. If the culture starts to get a little bit stale because you're stagnating as a business or you're laying people off, you got to retain the people that you do have. And there's some research that McKinsey did recently over the summer, asked people who just left their job what was the reason that you left your job. Top one wasn't salary. Salary was number two. Top one was lack of learning and development and career growth opportunities. So if you want to hold on to people, you really do need to provide that. And so that's our argument for learning and development, even in a tight market.
Do you ever come into a situation where this might be a little too much of inside baseball, and you could not answer it if you don't want, but do you ever go into a situation where a really toxic company comes to you and they blame their employees about culture, and they come in and then all of a sudden it becomes a really big bitch session to their coach about how much their company sucks? Like, I could see that happening.
Totally. I mean, we are lucky to work with a bunch of great companies. I don't know that I would describe any of their cultures as toxic, but we definitely see some disgruntled employees, as you would anywhere. And one
Hmm.
of the things that we try to avoid is putting like a manager and their employee in the same session so that everyone can be candid. But training can be a solution for that as well, like a tonic. We've seen people go to a conflict resolution workshop accidentally get put into a breakout room together when in fact they never should have been, because they've been feuding for years and they hate each other. But suddenly, Zoom tells you you're in this one-on-one breakout room for 10 minutes to like walk through this new learning that you've got. And the story, that was a real story, and they came out saying, wow, we actually resolved a bunch of stuff that we've been struggling with for years because of how this training had helped us kind of have a conversation or a framework to think about our differences. And so, they're friends forever now. So you can have a healing effect, I think, on culture through training. The other nice thing, I suppose, is that oftentimes culture, especially remote culture these days, can be quite distributed and siloed because you're not bumping into people in the office so much. But if you're doing training with folks from engineering and marketing and sales all together that might not normally work together, they get to know each other through this kind of deep developmental experience, so that they've got those connections across the company for the normal workplace. So it definitely heals culture in a few different ways.
So if you were to rewind back to seed days, Hone HQ seed days, and you were, putting together your product, you're talking to customers, you're selling, how did you identify, because you said this a couple of different times, and I think it's super important, but identifying budget around
Mm-hmm.
this. Like, how did you think about developing your product and, talking about like budget share and like what you could capture within the wallet?
Yeah.
Could you talk to, especially for a founder that's, trying to figure out how to really price their product, how to really position their product within, a list of vendors that their customer might use?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in those early days, and now we're still internally, we're tight on budget. So we couldn't afford hone.com, which would be the company name, .com. We had to get Hone HQ, which was a much cheaper domain, but the company name is actually Hone. So I should have made that clearer at the start.
This is costing you fortune, man.
Yeah,
Like people are,
exactly.
I mean, like I'm calling it Hone HQ, and this is.
Yeah, totally. One day, if you're listening and you own hone.com, give me a call. But
Yeah.
yeah, so that was us in the early days. But how did we identify budget with customers? I mean, I think there's just a vast difference for entrepreneurs who are going after existing budget, which would be a hone. People have a training budget; they're going to spend it with a vendor. We just need to be the best vendor, or versus a company that's trying to create a budget for something. A company in our space is a bit like that. That's done it very successfully. That would be like a better up, because companies
Hmm.
didn't necessarily have a budget for one-on-one coaching for the upper half of their company, but better up did a great job of convincing them that they should do that. But it just takes longer and it's hard. It's a more of an uphill battle if there's not a budget already. And I think one of my repeated lessons, having done it wrong a few times in the past, is that when you're creating a new product, I prefer the first category, because if you're just one step away from something that people know, then it's really easy to describe. You can say why it's different and better. There's often an existing budget or route to market, and so I think you can get to success faster that way than getting too off the beaten track and creating something too crazy and new. I mean, of course, the greatest companies in the world have been built that way. I'm not saying don't do that, but
Hmm.
if you want to play the probabilities and you have a portfolio of one as an entrepreneur, like you're pouring everything into your business, and perhaps you're a second time or kind of middle-aged founder like me, and you want to have a bit more certainty than the big swings you take in your 20s, then I prefer the kind of the first category of existing market, existing budget, build a 10x better solution and just go sell into that.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's right. Especially if you're in B2B enterprise kind of SaaS. Like
Right.
don't take big swings, learn, because I mean what you don't know, I mean you could build something that's 10x better and then you can do your kind of leapfrog innovation after you
Right.
have a portfolio.
Totally. And there's a playbook, and it's someone's job to go out and buy your product. They're a more rational buyer. Absolutely.
So tell me a little bit about tell me a little bit about yourself prior to FanDuel, going into FanDuel, and then going into Hone, because really curious to know your background. You said got a doctorate degree. That's cool. So tell me a little bit about yourself and kind of what you did.
Yeah, totally. So I grew up in Wales, proud Welshman and Welsh rugby fan. Maybe there's a few listening, who knows. Went to college in Cambridge for computer science, so it was a CS major, and really, was just kind of enthralled by the startup world. I'm dating myself, but I was undergrad around kind of 2000, and so it was the dot-com boom and then bust, but it just seemed so exciting what was possible there. Looked up to companies like Google, where the founders had a PhD or were on a PhD program, and used that novel technology to create, an incredible world-changing company. So for someone that wanted to have impact, I was like, okay, I want to go into research, because I can either be a researcher and discover stuff for the world, or I can discover an idea for a company. And so I started a PhD in Edinburgh, in Scotland, in machine learning and computer vision. Way before it was cool, and kind of in a different era of the field, in 2004, 2005. But
you wouldn't have been fun to drink with in Scotland, I don't think.
well, you'd have to check that. I think Edinburgh has more pubs per square mile than any other city in Europe, and we tried them all. So
Nice.
It's definitely a fun place. But yeah, the mission was always to have a big impact on the world, either through research or through companies, and companies just felt like the faster path to do it. And then, in the mid 2000s, you saw companies like YouTube that, to a naive 23-year-old or whatever, were just websites selling for billions of dollars and impacting millions of people. So okay, I don't need a PhD level research project to go start a company. I can just create a really great consumer experience on the web, and that can be my company. And so I actually quit the PhD program, got my master's, quit the PhD. I'm not officially a doctor, much to the disappointment of my parents, but did get to start companies right out of grad school. Had a couple that we ended up pivoting away from, that ultimately became FanDuel. And that just took off like a rocket ship, making more money, I think, in the first month than the other ideas had made in the first 2 years. So even though it was kind of a quirky space for us, it was just an opportunity too good to turn down. And so we rode it all the way. And then, the rest is history.
How did you come up with that idea, you and your co-founders? There was like 3 of you, right?
Yeah, I mean, there was 5 of us originally. 3 of us for the previous company, paired with 2 new folks that actually knew how to build businesses. We knew how to...
Some grown-ups. 3 first 2 grown-ups.
We knew how to build products and technology, so it was a great match. Wasn't our first idea. We actually started working on a company called HubDub. It was a news prediction site where you could go make play money bets or predictions on news stories, whether that was Brad and Angelina at the time, or it was like 2008, so it was kind of the Democratic primary and then the election. So politics, celebrity gossip, world news. And it was kind of fun. It was free to use. We got about 50,000 users. Didn't make much money. I think probably about $400 in revenue a month. So
nice.
Zero.
Yeah.
Enough
product market fit, baby. Yeah.
There you go. Enough to pay for a few pints in the Scottish pubs, but that was about it.
Yeah.
And so we knew we needed to pivot. We'd raised a Series A. This was a 2008 Scottish Series A, so it was about 1.5 million. Not a lot of cash these days, but we made it last for like a year and a half or something. But yeah, we ended up realizing we needed to monetize. We saw that the category in HubDub that was the busiest, that had the most predictions every single day, was sports. So we're like, okay, we need to do a daily prediction game that's in sports that we can monetize, and we can do that monetization within the framework of fantasy sports and not, it wouldn't be illegal gambling. So let's do a daily fantasy sports site, except that it wasn't called that then. We were just goofing around with different game concepts. And it worked. I mean, I built the first version of FanDuel in a Google spreadsheet. I put an ad on Craigslist saying, hey, I'm going to play this quirky game every day. Send me some money over PayPal. I'll send you some money back if you win. And people did it. We couldn't believe it. And the best thing about it was they would email me when I'd stop. I'd do an experiment for a couple of days and I'd stop doing it. Then they'd email me saying, look, when's the next game? I want to play. I want to do more. $5 is not enough. Let's do 50. And so I'm like, oh, I think we might have something here. If it wasn't Craigslist, PayPal, and Google Sheets, and it was actually a nice website, we might have a business. So we de-risked the ideas, I think, early on through kind of prototyping that way.
And who was the other one? Who was the other big one?
Draft something, yeah.
DraftKings,
forget
right?
the name, yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
I'm
you
kidding.
two were the biggest. Yeah. Fuck them. You two were the biggest in the space. What type? You kind of created the space. So what? Regulatory hurdles. What was that like?
Yeah, definitely. Credit to DraftKings. We got started in 2009 with FanDuel, built the biggest company in the space, and stopped counting in our spreadsheet of competitors around competitor number 90. Like, there's just too many people doing something similar to keep track of in those early days. DraftKings were really the only other company that broke out, and it was kind of a two-horse race, and it has been ever since. But it was fiercely competitive between the two of us. We had slightly different products, but really it's the same product and business underneath.
Sure.
Yeah. And so it was just kind of an arms race to see who could raise and spend the most to win the market. Because it was a marketplace model, the more people you have, the bigger the prize pools, the more people you get. There's a circular network effect. And so it was really important to both of us to be the biggest. And so we would compete every football season by raising money early in the summer and then spending it late in the summer to get as many people as we could between 15th of August and 15th of October. And that really came to a head in 2015 when you couldn't look at a sports game or a sports channel without seeing an ad for us. I think between the two of us, on average, every 90 seconds, we were showing an ad. And that pissed a ton of people off, to be honest. So prevalent, busy, and annoying. And the reason we did it was because it worked. We'd proven at smaller scales that we knew how many users we would get for whatever TV channel, TV ad, time of day. So we could calculate exactly how much we needed to spend to keep ahead of DraftKings. But we had to make that spend all happen in that 2-month window. And that's why it was just so bunched up and concentrated. That, to answer your question, is what ultimately led to our regulatory cycle. We thought by 2015, we'd got through 4 or 5 rounds of serious funding. And they'd all done their legal due diligence. So it felt like the legal question mark had kind of evaporated years ago. And then, because we pissed off America, sports-loving America, with too many ads, then that made us a bit of a target. And so there was a scandal that kind of lit the match that exploded everything. And that was that an employee at DraftKings, the same day as he accidentally published some of the lineup data that he had privileged access to on DraftKings, happened to win $300,000 or $350,000 on FanDuel. And so this got picked up by the New York Times as some kind of insider trading scandal, and a lot of
big explosion, right?
Big explosion, yeah. I remember getting news alerts from the New York Times saying FBI investigating FanDuel and DraftKings. I'm like, oh, that's my company. Okay, deal with it in the morning. But that was a wild time. And the team, I can't personally take a ton of credit for this, but the team did a great job on the legal side of really working with regulators and states to create a brand new legal framework for DFS. And that allowed us to operate with clarity and legitimacy in almost all states. And so that was a cycle to go through. It certainly kind of threatened the business at the early stages when we didn't know how many states would be able to pass legislation in. But actually, now is a really healthy business. And of course, the world has changed with past
Well,
the veto.
the government probably didn't understand it, and you had to handhold them to make sure that the consumers were protected, right? At the end of the day.
That's right. And the government was just seeing these crazy headlines where, we'd be accused both of being gambling, which is kind of a random game experience,
Mm-hmm.
and
Right.
being a shark infested pool where all these skilled players were eating up these smaller players, which would require it not to be kind of a random chance game. So you can't really have both, but we were anyway being attacked for being both. And so they were just wanting to make sure, like, to what degree was that true? How can we protect consumers from that? And yeah, we changed the product and or evolved the product to fit with those regulations, and it's a healthy business again.
How nice is it to be able to pay a sales team to bring in money, except for paying Google and Facebook?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's very different. I mean, we didn't have a single salesperson in the 500 to 1,000 person company that was FanDuel when I was there. Bigger now. Um, and so it's nice that you get such FaceTime with your customers. You can get the nuanced feedback through the sales team or by riding side saddle with the sales team. The thing that I've noticed that's harder is, of course, if you're pivoting or if you're changing your messaging, then it's not just a question of like making a few different ads, changing the landing page for consumers and away
Mm-hmm.
to go. You've got like 20 salespeople to train the new pitch to. And so you've got to kind of go one by one or small groups to like teach them what's different, have them pitch it back to you, tell them what they could do better. And so there's quite a laborious process of change. And so that makes it even more important to make sure that you've got strong product market fit before you really lean into scaling the team. Because if you're trying to whiplash all over the place, then it's just not going to work in that setting.
Yeah. What are you excited about these days?
I mean, a lot of things. Having 30 million bucks in the bank gives you a lot of latitude.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite parts of building a company is obviously building the team. And the thing that's perhaps a little different with Hone versus FanDuel is, the mission of education, of democratizing great executive training for as many people on the planet as we can, really, moves me every day, but also attracts, a certain mission-driven type of person. And so I love the level of
Mm-hmm.
talent that I'm getting to meet as we talk about the different roles we have in, sales and engineering and account management and learning design and coaching. Like that's awesome. And it's kind of like just gives you this entrepreneur's high when you've been searching for someone for a role for a while and you meet just like the perfect person and they're going to be awesome. So I love that part of it. And we're certainly doing a lot of hiring. I'm also excited about the extra stuff we can do now. We've been very focused on manager training so far. We've recently branched out into DEI and do a lot of work there, but we're now moving into individual collaboration skills. We're doing some wellness and mental health programming. We're actually doing some like personality testing and team dynamic stuff that really takes an executive team style experience to frontline teams to help them work more effectively together. So it's just cool to be like have the capital to be experimenting and pushing the product forward a bit faster.
What do you feel the biggest threat to Hone is?
That's a good question. I mean, I think it's fast followers. To be honest, I think that we are doing
Mm-hmm.
something that's unique that that other companies can't. Well, traditional training companies who we compete with often have great people and great content, but they're not tech companies by DNA, and so it's hard for them to kind of make that shift and compete with us on the tech side. So I would be thinking about companies who have some tech, have a mission that's similar to ours, maybe their model isn't working so well, so they're going to pivot to what is working. To the earlier point, like we are now the example of something that's working really well. So can they, do something that's one step removed from us, or be a kind of fast follower to us? That was what happened with DraftKings, right? They launched in 2012. We launched in 2009. So that kind of gives me scar tissue from like the duopoly that we created to make me want to move as fast as I possibly can with Hone, so we don't see those fast followers.
Sure. Right, because what you don't want is especially if like you have your competitors have investors that are not really into economics like as much, and they like they don't care what they pay or what the ACV is or anything, and it can get pretty dicey pretty quick. And like honestly, like they can just outlast you, right, from a capital perspective. But I love what you're doing. I'm sure that there's a lot of value. I'm sure that your product isn't cheap, nor should it be, because you're probably bringing a ton of value to these companies, and that's going to give you some staying power, which is awesome.
Thank you. Absolutely.
Awesome. Quick couple questions, canned questions. What is your favorite book?
I just read Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. They're Navy SEALs. They're incredibly decorated as soldiers in their own right, but then they became the leadership trainers for the Navy SEALs. So if you want to know, really actionable, simple, literally battle-tested leadership tips, then that is a great book. Also enjoyed Amp It Up recently by Frank Slootman, and all of the kind of great and the good personal development stuff that is on my shelf as well.
Yeah, Slootman's a beast. I still don't really know what Snowflake does, but it's an incredible company.
Same.
But he's a beast. And then Jocko, I love that book as well. I've read that. I like how he compares it to actually a military experience and then the actual learning after that. I think that's pretty neat.
Yeah. And if you can remember that under fire, then you can remember it when you're in a startup. So we like it.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Is Jocko going to do any content for you?
Hey, if you want to drop him a text for me, that would be great. He actually lives in San Diego as well. So.
Yeah, you got the money, man. You can do it.
Well, that's right. Yeah. 30 million, send 3 to Jocko and maybe he'll speak to us.
Exactly. All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the Capital Stack, where we talk to founders, entrepreneurs, and operators and investors about all things value creation. We drop an episode every Tuesday. Please follow, comment, get back to me, and we'll see you next week. Thanks. Bye-bye.